Hello everybody, welcome to the channel, and I gotta say, if you liked my YouTube video essays I used to upload, then tough, because Overwatch Stadium is out, and I am hardcore addicted to it. Specifically, I really like playing Reaper, and I hit Legend with him pretty easily last season, so I tried every single power, and I want to make a tier list about how good I think each power is. Um, Specifically, I want to clarify that anything can work in Stadium because there's so many more factors that influence whether or not you lose or win a match beyond just your power choice. Having said that, I do think... Hold on, I'm going to close my actual Overwatch client here. Save some space. I do think that some powers are much more consistently helpful than others. And I think some powers will give you easier wins, whereas others require a lot more effort on the part of the Reaper player. So I'm going to be ranking these based off of ease of use, how easy of a win you can get with that power, and how often I personally would take that power in a situation where I am trying to win. Um, with that said, I want to hop it right in here and take our first power, Backstabber, and put it right into D tier. Backstabber is horrible. It is an awful power. I've tried it. It doesn't make sense. On paper, it makes sense to be like, oh, Reaper spends a lot of time flanking behind the enemy team. It makes sense to have a power where he does more damage from behind. But there are so many flaws with this power. The first one, it says, after using an ability. So to proc this power, you have to first commit with an ability. Usually it means teleporting behind the enemy team. You can also Wraith Form, but Wraith Form is the much more important ability in Reaper's kit, so it's just not a good idea to Wraith Form behind someone to get Backstabber procced. So you're teleporting behind someone, and then it says your next shot deals 50% damage, extra damage. That means you only get one bullet. So you've committed your cooldown, and then you get one shot to do that extra damage. If you miss the shot, the power is useless. If you are not in effective damage range, the shot is useless. So not only do you have to teleport behind someone, but you have to teleport closely behind them to be within Reaper's effective range. Or you have to just teleport farther back and then walk up to them. But that's risky because that gives them a lot of time to react and turn around. Reaper's footsteps are really loud, so it's unlikely that they won't notice. And the final problem is it's not even 50% extra damage. It's 50% damage over 3 seconds. That is a really long time in Overwatch time. That gives your enemy a lot of time to react with a Fade, or a Wraith Form, or a Suzu, or whatever. There's so many ways that can be negated or undone somehow within that time, undoing that amount. And those are abilities that the heroes likely would have used even if you didn't take Backstabber, because the fact is that if you are behind a squishy and within melee, within effective shotgun damage range, you're almost always going to get the kill on them anyway. It's only about a 2-shot situation at most, unless they've really gone into survivability. Maybe then I would take Backstabber, but ultimately, it's just you have to use your ability, you have to not miss your shot, you have to hope they don't have a cooldown that undoes it, and even then, it's not a good idea. You can kind of use it to help against tanks, but it's just, it's so situational. Don't take Backstabber. Next, Harvest Fest. Shotgun hits have a 10% chance to spawn a Soul Globe, which gives you 25% life, 25% ammo, and 25% move speed. Man, I like this power. It's fun. If this were a fun tier list, it would be probably up in S tier. There's no... there we go. There's very, very few percentage chance things in Overwatch Stadium, and especially Overwatch OG. There's just no... You don't get a lot of things that only proc on a chance. So, Harvest Fest being a chance item, of course, sometimes it pops off and other times it's nothing. I've gone entire team fights, heck, I've gone entire rounds in Stadium without seeing a single Soul Globe drop. Other times I'll see the Soul Globes drop, but they like jump on the railing or something next to the bridge, and it's out of my ability. I can't jump high enough to reach it, so I can't get it. And then there have been times where I'm by myself on the flank, and then the other team's Genji or whatever, who's also by himself on the flank, sees me. We get into a 1v1. He does better and gets headshots on me, but I go into Wraith form and there's soul globes everywhere, and I pick them all up and restore all my life, and then absolutely wreck him right after because he's injured and I'm not. Like, if you want to get max value out of Harvest Fest, you should be going into attack speed and clip size, which is usually not as good as weapon power. You know, weapon power lets you secure the kills quickly before the enemy team can properly react, whereas attack speed and clip size will improve your sustain in fights, but, you know, it's only good against certain comps. Um, Sometimes it's good, though. You know, sometimes it can make a distinct difference. Where to put this? It's definitely not A tier. Maybe I'm gonna slightly generously put this in B tier, I think. It's an okay power. Revolving Ruin. Close range Hellfire shotgun hits grant 4% attack speed for 1 second. Now, 7 meters is actually not that big of a distance. If you go into the practice range, it's basically, you have to be within a, you have to be close enough that almost all your pellets are going to be hitting the target anyway. So there's no way to paint this other than just a full tank busting power. You know, if you are against a really, really over strengthened Orisa or Reinhardt or something, you can get a lot of value out of Revolving Ruin because you're just constantly shooting them, and every time you land a shot, the attack speed goes up. And if your attack speed is already high, then you're going to be landing more shots, so your attack speed will actually be growing even faster, and you can get up to some pretty ridiculous attack speeds with this power. But the other benefit is it's kind of hard with only 6 item slots to balance weapon power and attack speed. Doing both of them is kind of hard, so you can spec into weapon power and then take Revolving Ruin to fill in the attack speed hole in your kit. But, you know, having said that, this is only for shots that land. It doesn't proc against shields. Against squishies, you're usually only going to 2 or 3 shot them, but even then, you have to be careful of things like Genji Deflect or Cryo, Colder or something where it won't proc. It only lasts for 1 second, so it's only while you're in that range, that sweet spot. It's fun to get a really high attack speed, but to be honest, I think it's just going to be C tier because it's only good against some tanks. It is good against those tanks. There are times where I take Revolving Ruin and I love it. But, those kinds of tanks are so exploitable that not a lot of people will play them. You do see Reinhardt's, and it's good against Reinhardt, but again, it doesn't proc against shield. I'm repeating myself. You get it. It's very situational. It's only C tier. Shared Siphon. The Reaping also heals the nearest ally within 10 meters. So I slept on this all the way up until like All-Star 2. I didn't think it was worth it because you can't control who is healing very easily, right? Overwatch is a game where winning team fights generally comes down to target priority and focus fire amongst your team, right? If there's a person whose cooldowns are used or a person who is out of position or both, you all want to be shooting that person to really burst down their health as quick as possible before a cooldown is refreshed or a teammate gets into position to help that teammate escape, right? So generally, as a support, you want to be healing whoever on your team needs the heals the most. But Shared Siphon, you can't really do that because, you're going to be too focused on hitting your shots and target priority to be worrying about who you need to be healing. But that was my initial problem with it, but I've come to learn that there are so many situations where Shared Siphon is just a really strong comeback tool, Like, if you have a Genji who's diving and you're diving with them, then taking Shared Siphon means you're both healing the whole time you're diving in, which is super effective. If you just need to hold down the fort with your tank, you play next to your tank, suddenly you basically are effectively another a third support for your tank by dealing a lot of damage. You know, it's a lot of healing that Shared Siphon does. Um, you know, 30% is really nice. By the way, this does not stack with Strangle Step, which doubles your lifesteal. I tried it, doesn't work. It's a flat 30% the whole game. It's still good though. 30% is a lot, and when you consider that your damage gets higher every round, then that 30% is also going to effectively be more health that you're giving. The main use for this is, as I said, as a comeback tool. If it's just me and one support left on the battlefield, then you have Reaper, who's a really, really solid, strong damage dealer. But he's also, with this, healing the support. So if you've ever tried to attack a support and get the pick, you know it's at its hardest when the other support is healing them, right? Two supports healing each other is a really, really difficult nut to crack in Overwatch. And with Shared Siphon, you can effectively support your supports, which makes it so much harder to really get those last few picks and earn a point. So I'm actually going to be putting Shared Siphon. It might even be A tier. It's come in handy so many times. I'm going to put it in A tier. Alright, Shrouded Shrapnel. Some people swear by this ability. After using Wraith Form, your next magazine has 25% more pellets and 50% larger spread. Now, against targets where all your shots are going to be hitting, all pellets will be hitting anyway, this is basically a flat 25% damage increase, which is huge value for a power. That's so much. The problem is you have to make sure all your shots are hitting. So it's only really going to be effective if you're really, really close to your target, or if your target has a large enough hitbox that this is going to, most of your pellets are going to be hitting anyway. So there are some tanks like Junker Queen who are their hitboxes are quite narrow, and I find that this is a slightly less effective power. But most tanks have huge hitboxes, so it's a great tank busting ability. But frankly, even against some DPS, Cassidy has quite a large hitbox and not a lot of ways to get away from Reaper. Same thing with Mei, also a huge hitbox, and a lot of the time this can be the difference maker between two-shotting Mei or, killing her in 2 shots and getting that elimination. Or you shoot her without Shrouded Shrapnel, you won't kill her in 2 shots, and then she'll be able to react with Colder and escape your pick. So Shrouded Shrapnel can make a big difference. There is a huge flaw in it, though. It's really not easy to tell whether you have your increased spread active or not. I know you can just remember whether you use Wraith Form, but sometimes in the heat of the moment, it is just really hard to remember whether or not you have your Shrouded Shrapnel bullets loaded or your normal bullets loaded. And that's a big difference because there's a lot of flying characters in Overwatch Stadium right now. Juno is popular, Mercy's really popular, Frey is really good, and Pharah got added in the newest season, and she's super duper duper strong. Lots of people are playing Pharah. And against any character that can fly or stay out of your effective range, Shrouded Shrapnel can make it so there's a lot of moments where your shots almost feel like they do nothing. I mean, increased spread. Reaper got buffed a while back to make his longer range shots a little more effective, specifically to fight this anti-flyer problem. But with the increased spread, it is a huge flaw. So it means that it makes target focus a lot more difficult. You have a lot less options in who you're able to effectively damage in a fight because of how many characters can stay out of Reaper's effective range, and Shrouded Shrapnel will just make you even less effective against those characters. So for that reason, it would be S tier otherwise, but with this spread problem, I'm gonna bump it down to B tier because sometimes I do find myself regretting taking this power because there are a lot of characters that stay just out. Their spacing is really good, and I just can't get the kill on them. I probably would have without this power, I think. All right, Spirited to Slay. Eliminations reduce the cooldown of Wraith Form by 100%. And Shadow Step. This used to say eliminations reset your cooldowns, and then they changed the wording, and I have no idea why, because this means the same thing. It's just about 1,000 times more confusing. So, yeah, I don't know why they changed the wording on this, but it does mean the same thing. Your cooldowns, your Reapers, he only has 2 cooldowns, but they both reset every time you get a kill. Um, it's interesting. Any kind of ability that has an on-kill effect is going to be a bit of a double-edged sword. You know, if you're already winning, it's good because you're getting a lot of kills, which makes every subsequent kill easier. There's this amazing thing that happens with Spirited to Slay, especially with Wraith Renewal, where you basically, you know, you land a kill on a target, you Wraith form up to your next target, heal to full because of Wraith Renewal, and then you get your next kill, and then you Wraith form to your next target. You know, you can. It's a really good chain kill ability, but in situations where you really are struggling to get that first pick, it doesn't do anything for you. You know, it doesn't help you get the initial kill at all. So for that reason, I don't tend to take this first power. Maybe third or second or third or fourth is good for Spirited to Slay, but early on it is tough. It depends what comp you're facing. Um, Kiriko is meta right now, and within that meta is the Kira clone ability, where she spawns a weak clone. And it is important to note that this will proc off that clone, so there are situations where I can really exploit that really common Kiriko build by, you know, you go into the team with your Shadow Step, your teleport. You can do a bit of fighting, try and get a pick, use Wraith Renewal to heal yourself and really extend how long you're able to stay in the enemy team. And then normally when you would have no escape, you can just two-shot the Kira clone that's always there, and then get your cooldowns back, and then you have another Wraith Renewal to heal yourself again, and your Shadow Step to escape. So you can get into some really interesting grooves. So there are situations where this is a really solid ability and can really, it's good for chain killing. It's good for, it increases the number of plays you can make. And it does let you go a little bit farther. You know, I do tend to play Overwatch in this way where I get tunnel vision. And if you get bad tunnel vision like me, sometimes that can pay off when you have Spirited to Slay, because you know if you can just get that pick, no matter how bad your positioning is, if you can just get the pick, then you can Wraith form out of there safely. So I'm going to put in A tier. This is really useful in a lot of builds, and has a lot of serious applications in today's meta. So it's a solid power. Definitely worth taking. Vampiric Touch. I took this so many times. If there was anything that held back my progress in getting to Legend, it was my absolute, almost unhealthy fixation on trying to make Vampiric Touch work. There's so many problems with this. Hits with quick melee mark enemies for 5 seconds. All allies get 20% lifesteal against marked enemies. So, you know, the biggest issue with this is Reaper's effective range with his guns is a much longer distance than his melee range. You have to get a lot closer to your targets than necessary to proc Vampiric Touch. So against squishy targets, almost any squishy target, frankly, except for like a really buffed Zenyatta or something, you know, someone who's gone really hard into survival, which is not a very common thing, but some people do it. But against most squishy targets, you will probably just be able to kill them anyway, by just shooting them. It's not necessary to go in for a melee attack first, and frankly, it's usually a bad idea. You know, like, if you get into melee range of a Zen, his melee is better than yours, right? A melee range of a Cassidy, suddenly you're in, like, right-click one-shot range, you know, whereas you wouldn't have been if you stayed in a little farther back. This goes wrong for me so constant. Against any flying character in the game, of which there are many, this basically never will proc. Nor should you be trying to. It doesn't make sense to put that much effort into proccing a lifesteal when you could just go for the kill anyway. You know, most people will die. So the only time you would be using this in any way that makes sense is against the enemy tank, right? It's the only one where your encounters will be dragged out long enough that you and your teammates will actually see a lot of value from that lifesteal. But even then, it's just not a good idea to get into melee range of tanks. Any tank. You know, like, Reinhardt will do more damage than Reaper in melee range. It's his whole thing. It's not a good idea. Junker Queen has her axe that can absolutely wreck people with ability power, which is a really common Junker Queen build, but even her shotgun can one-shot, basically, in a weapon power build. Who else? I mean, Diva has her defense matrix, so you might think, oh, Diva or Sigma have their suck or defense matrix, defensive, that's a great time to go in, get your melee off, and then back out, and then everyone has lifesteal for when their defensive ability goes down. And sometimes that works, but in practice, it's just so dangerous because, you know, 5 seconds of lifesteal, it might sound like a long time, but that is an amount of time that can pretty easily be weighted out with those defensive abilities, like any kind of shield or defense matrix or whatever. And even if not, it just doesn't tend to make a big difference. Meanwhile, by getting into melee range of those tanks, you're putting yourself in so much risk. I mean, Diva, with her micro missiles, especially once she procs into it, can delete anyone that's that close to them, even a Reaper. Same thing with Sigma. If he rocks you, there are many times where I play against Sigma and he hits me with his rock and I'm just dead. Like I will be dead before I can stand up again. So why on earth would I make it easy by getting that close to him? It's just such a huge risk for such a small reward. I tried this so many times, but I'm gonna put it in D tier. Never take this ability. Oh my god. Speaking of bad abilities. Death Step! Oh my god. I'm sorry. I have to... How do I make another... There we go. Gray is a good color. Game losing. Sorry, I screwed up the colors. I don't know how to do it, but oh my god. Oops. I'll go like that. I just want to change the color. We'll go, this will be green, I guess. I don't know. And then game losing, we'll make that gray because this ability is so bad. It's so bad. This is hands down the worst power in Reaper's kit. Hands down the worst one in Stadium. I can't think of any hero that has a power that's as bad as this one. It is so bad. I swear, like, every time... I also hit Legend on Junker Queen, and I plan on making a Junker Queen tier list next, but I never lost games more consistently than when I had a DPS that went ability power Death Step Reaper. I never lost games playing as Reaper more consistently than when I went Death Step Reaper. It's horrible. Never pick this unless you're going a complete meme build or you have an extreme amount of confidence in your team. Alright, let's get into why this is bad. First, it is a huge commitment to your ability power build. If you take this power and you don't commit to ability power, you have essentially nerfed your Shadow Step severely, because without speccing into ability power, the amount of damage this does is basically negligible. Like, it's so little damage. 50% reduced damage, and it happens for only 1.5 seconds, which is way shorter than a normal Death Blossom. So between those two stats, you're never going to get a kill against anyone that has even a little bit, over half health, or even half health, or even like 30% health. It's unlikely to get a kill. So, but it's not an option. If you teleport in, you're doing this power. And when you do that, you are signaling to the entire enemy team, I am vulnerable. I cannot Wraith form right now. I am a defenseless person that cannot attack you at range for the next 1.5 seconds or defend myself. So it is a magnet for dangerous, really high impact abilities, right? You will suffer so many Junker Queen knives, Sigma rocks, Ash headshots you will suffer using this ability. It's horrible. It's gonna make you the target of everything. So meanwhile, let's see, what happens if you do proc into this. There's like a bizarre number of items in the shop that are meant to buff your Death Blossom. But if you take all of those items, you can just about keep up with everyone, assuming that you don't get absolutely wrecked every time you Death Blossom into the enemy team. This is basically encouraging you to teleport into the middle of the enemy team, which typically is not a good idea. It's not a good idea to teleport in the middle of everyone, because you're gonna be the subject of everything. But this basically encourages you to do that. Even with max ability power, this really doesn't do enough damage for it, you to justify it. When you Especially if you take Strangle Step, which is something that you're always going to be wanting to take with Death Step anyways. But if you're going to be taking Strangle Step, you need to be aware of the fact that, you know, normal Shadow Step lets you fire your shotgun shot right after your Shadow Step ends. Like, immediately after. And that can be right on the head of a target you teleport right next to. With Strangle Step, that happens almost instantly. Or, that is enough to basically guarantee a kill, or at least force a retreat. A point-blank headshot after teleporting next to them. But with Death Step, you can't do that. Death Blossom spreads damage evenly amongst multiple targets. So if you're trying to single out a specific person who's out of position, or try and take map control, this is just objectively weaker. It's just objectively less damage than if you just shot them, even without weapon power. You can do a lot of damage by just shooting someone point blank. So it's not effective in that situation. So there are some really specific compositions you can go up against where you won't immediately die doing Death Step and can even get some solid value, but you know, there's no composition in the game. Zero compositions that you will face where Death Step is not an objectively worse option than just going weapon power, than just shooting people with your shotgun. It's a fun meme build. If you're in casual, or if you're not interested in winning, it is a lot of fun to mess around with. And sometimes you can find success, but finding success with Death Step says a lot more about the enemy team than it does about your skill. I gotta say it. Never take Death Step. Never, ever, ever take Death Step if you have even a little bit of desire to win a round. Alright. Silent as the Grave. This is such an interesting ability. I don't think a lot of people take this, and it's hard to rate because it's really difficult to actually see the value that you get from this, Harvest Fest, you watch the orbs pop out of your enemies. Wraith Renewal, you can watch your health bar go up. Silence the Grave, you'll never see the Zenyatta that didn't charge up a volley because he didn't hear you because you took this, right? There's no way to know how tuned in your enemies are, at least early game, to your footsteps. Um, so it's hard to see how much value you're actually going to be getting out of this after you take it, right? It's tough to know how much attention you're drawing to yourself, and how aware of that attention the enemy team is going to be. So competitively speaking, though, it's really good. I mean, like I said, there have been times where it almost feels like the enemy team has wall hacks against me because, as soon as I go around a corner doing what I think is going to be a surprise attack, I get triple, quadruple headshot by 4 people who all knew I was there, because my footsteps are super duper loud. And it's really easy to forget how loud they are when you're playing Reaper because the footsteps are much, much louder to the enemy team than they are to the Reaper himself, right? The enemies will hear your footsteps at an amplified volume compared to your teammates and yourself. So it's something to be hyper aware of when you're playing Reaper, and Silent as the Grave will really even that playing field. So even the score and make it a lot more difficult for the enemy team to just know where you are at all times because of your super duper loud clomping footsteps. Um, to use this competitively, you want to be paying really hyper close attention to how much the enemy team seems to know where you are, right? If you think you have the element of surprise and you die quickly afterwards, I would encourage you to watch the death cams, assuming that they don't glitch out and skip automatically, which happens sometimes. But watch the death cams and you can see the perspective of your enemy and see if it looks like they are tracking you through walls. Because if it almost feels like they have wall hacks, the chances are that they are paying very close attention to audio cues. But not all Overwatch players do that. Some people are listening to music. Some people are in a loud voice call with their friends. Some people aren't even playing with sound. So those players are not going to get any, you're not going to get any value with this against them. So you need to be paying very close attention to your enemy and seeing how much before you can determine how much value you're going to get with this. But it's actually, I think, a solid B tier. Like, there are some people who were driving me nuts because I just couldn't get the drop on them, and this makes a big difference. But I would never take it as a first power because you never know if it's going to be a waste or not. I would take it second or even third power a lot of the time. But you know, you have to time your choosing of this power really carefully because if it's too late, your round might already be too far gone. Losing too many rounds early on in Overwatch, um, in Overwatch Stadium can make you fall by very far behind on cash and just frankly morale as well. So if you spend the first 2 rounds getting wrecked because you can't get the jump on them, maybe take this as a second power. Um, but yeah, it's a tough one. It's a really tough one to rank. B tier feels about right though. All right, Strangle Step. This is our first S tier power. This is so strong. This is so applicable to so many situations. You can run this in any Reaper build, no matter what you are going for, what you're trying to do, or how your playstyle is on Reaper. You will get so much value from Strangle Step. 30% Shadow Step cast speed doesn't sound like a lot, but it is a huge difference. You know, teleporting away. Usually with Reaper, you want to teleport in because that is when you're at full health and you have the element of surprise, etc., etc. And then Wraith form out, because your Wraith form is something that activates instantly, right? So you can wait until a dangerous ability or cooldown is coming your way, and then Wraith form to dodge it and go back to the safety of your team. Strangle Step, this activates, it's not instant, but it's really close to instant. It's so fast that almost most players you face in Overwatch Stadium will not be able to react to this quickly enough to really to punish you for doing this in the middle of the enemy team, right? You can engage and then reliably Strangle Step your way out. It also really, this cutoff makes you able to escape dangerous situations like a May ultimate, in the middle of a blizzard, or a Sigma ultimate. Usually Shadow Step is just a little too slow to escape those situations most of the time, and you will freeze or get caught in the gravity vortex before you can fully teleport out. Strangle Step eliminates that risk. You can very reliably teleport out of dangerous situations with this ability, where you would not have normally been able to. And that's not even the only use, though. That's a defensive use. But there's the other thing that I haven't even gotten into yet is that this doubles your lifesteal for 3 seconds. In really extended encounter, I mean, double, that's 60% of your damage, assuming you don't have any other lifesteal items, that is going right back into health for you. And with the amount of damage that Reaper does, that is huge. That's so much benefit. So if you're low on health and your supports are busy, it is a genuinely reliable option to just Strangle Step behind the enemy tank and put a few shots in them, and it will heal you basically to full in only a few shots. It's so strong. It's great for tank busting because it will keep you alive in an extended encounter, and take so much pressure off your supports to keep you up. So there's that benefit, and that's not even getting into the offensive use of this item. A big thing that Reaper needs to be doing is he needs to be taking map control away, right? Soldiers, Ashe, Cassidy, these characters, they really like to stand by themselves up on high ground and kind of almost sniper down onto the point. And if you normally try to teleport next to them, that ability takes so long that it gives them plenty of time to react and line up a Helix rocket or run away or a support to get in there. Meanwhile, with 30% cast speed, like I said, this happens so fast that they don't even have time to react most of the time. Silent as a Grave also affects your Shadow Step sound cue, but I didn't really touch on it because I end up taking Strangle Step almost every single game, and this happens so fast that the audio cue isn't enough. It's not enough. Like, people can't react to it fast enough because it happens so fast that audio cue or not, you're in their face before they know what to do. And you can just, assuming you didn't take Death Step like a good Reaper, you can basically instantly headshot them from any distance by just teleporting next to them and just holding down your left click on their head, and you will shoot them right away. And this happens so fast. It's so good. It's so good. You can take this in any Reaper build. Always take Strangle Step. You will never regret it. You might regret taking Ghosted, though. While in Wraith form, passing through enemies slows their move speed and attack speed for 30% for 3 seconds. So there are applications for Ghosted. It's okay. Usually, Wraith form is simply too valuable of a cooldown to be to use it just for nerfing the attack speed and movement speed of an enemy. Once you've exited your Wraith form, that is a signal. A good team will call that out and focus you down because they know you can't. You don't have your cop out ability basically. So it's really risky to use your Wraith form in such an offensive way against any team. However, if you have Spirited to Slay and you're getting a lot of cooldown reduction, it can be worth it to take Ghosted and just kind of pass through everyone. I mean, 30% move speed is a huge nerf against any hero that wants to move quickly or escape. Similarly, against Genji, who likes to dive and be really, really oppressive to the backline, this 30% move speed, if you push through him with that while he's diving you or one of your supports, that can make a big difference in whether or not he's able to escape or not. And it just gives you so much more opportunity to land shots on that diving enemy and get the kill, or at least ensure a trade. But it still is a big risk, It's just you have to be really careful with Ghosted because it is really easy to get caught up in the value of it, And if you overthink the value of Ghosted, then you might end up getting yourself killed more often than benefit. So I'm gonna put this in C tier. There have been times I took it and was happy with it, but there are more times where I take it and kind of wish I went with a different power instead. Yeah, it does complement really well with Spirited to Slay though. So I do sometimes find myself taking this as a final, like a fourth power. Round 7, I have everything I want. You know, I have maybe if I go with the extended, there are epic survival items that will extend your speed and length of Wraith form, and that really does, if you combine those two, it really does give you a lot more leeway to spend a bit of your Wraith form going forward and passing through the enemy before backing out. And then you get the value out of it as well. And you have to be aware that you're not always going to be the one who gets the value out of this. Sometimes if you have extended Wraith form duration and speed, you can reliably spend a bit of that to slow down the team and then watch your teammates take advantage of that. It's a lot more difficult to see how much value your teammates are getting from your abilities, and Ghosted is that kind of ability. But if you are trying to play a more supportive Reaper, Shared Siphon is always going to be better. All right, last power, Wraith Renewal. This is our second S tier item. This has so many uses. I do think Strangle Step is better, but Wraith Renewal is a power that I when I don't take this, I miss it so much. It's so hard. I've been spoiled by this power. 7% of your life every 1 second, doubling that when you're below 50% life. Usually this will be roughly about half your life bar most of the time. It's not going to fully heal you, but if you're at half health, that is a decent amount of support for yourself that you can do. It takes a lot of pressure off your supports, They will be able to put so much more healing into other places of your team if you are able to self-sustain using Wraith Renewal, which is super duper nice. The other benefit, though, is the offensive capabilities. There's a lot of situations where, let's say, you see an Ashe in the distance, they get a good headshot on you, you're at half health. Normally, Most Reaper's instincts will be to Wraith form because they don't want to get headshot again and die. But once you Wraith form, your only option is to retreat to a support or a health pack. If you try and go in on that low of an amount of, if you try and go in on half health, you're gonna get rolled, right? Wraith Renewal unlocks that restriction and allows Reaper to go in aggressively when he's low health. If you are low health, you can pop your Wraith form, and instead of retreating, you can go in with complete invincibility because of Wraith form, healing yourself the whole time, and then by the time you get there, you are going to be at full health, and the chances of winning that encounter are so much higher when you have high health. So that effectiveness, that is one of the reasons that Wraith Renewal is so effective, is it increases the number of options you have so much. You can use this defensively, and you can use it offensively, and you will use it both ways so many times as you climb with Reaper. It's such a there's not much else to say about it, you know. It's not as nuanced as Strangle Step or Shared Siphon, but you're just gonna there's not it speaks for itself. You're gonna see the value every time you take Wraith Renewal. You're gonna watch your health go up, and it's hard not to get value with Wraith Renewal, you know? It requires almost no effort. All of these other abilities you have to be consciously thinking about to get the most value out of, and a little bit with Wraith Renewal too, but for the most part, this is going to get value without you even thinking about it, you know? It's great. It's so effective. All right, that is my tier list for Reaper. Next, I plan on doing a tier list for Junker Queen, who is my favorite hero in Overwatch. Um, and yeah, let me know what you think. Tell me if I'm wrong. Tell me if you made a Death Step build that brought you all the way to Legend, and if I'm an idiot for putting it down in bottom tier. Yeah, have a good one, everybody. Take care.